So there's a couple of conversations there that you're having. I'm trying to judge, as we're discussing here, what's your level of day-to-day involvement. Now, you're not on the board, but you sound to me, and you certainly come across from my research as well, as somebody who's not going to be completely in the background. So I'm interested, what's your level of wanting to be informed?
Yeah, so I've signed a non-disclosure agreement with Rangers, so I'll get the board papers. So I'm an official observer, so I can read everything, I can attend the meetings, but I don't vote. I don't choose to vote because I'm not a director. So I know what's going on. We got a fair idea what's going on with Ross in terms of the players that he's looking at. In terms of day-to-day stuff, you know, I'll occasionally speak to George Leitha, I'll speak to Stuart Robertson, I'll speak to Ross just to find out what's going on. If I've not, I try and get to Ibrox every couple of months, but if I've not been around, you know, I'll get in touch with somebody. But for me, my interest is more helping to explore some of the commercial opportunities in Asia. Not much. I mean, my business is very Asia-centric. We're Asia-Pacific. You know, we're giants in China and Japan and South Korea and India and Singapore and Australia and all over Asia. These are massive football markets. You jump in a taxi in Bangkok and, you know, the driver hears your accent, and he'll tell you the full Rangers team. You know, that's what they're like in Asia. They are mental about football, and it's not just they're all Man United or Liverpool fans. You know, they get quite a breadth of knowledge about Scottish football as well as English football. But, you know, obviously the Premier League, English Premier League is the big ticket that everybody loves. But, I mean, my personal ambition is to help Ross, if I can, and James, you know, just on the commercial exploitation of how we can promote Rangers in Asia. I'm there. You know, and I've got a fairly good network in Asia. In the last few years, you know, nobody could travel around really. It was my intention early on when I started to get involved with the club to bring over potential sponsors, potential investors from Asia. And we had some trips lined up, but then the world just shut down.
Yeah.
So now that China again is starting to open up, I will revisit these old conversations, you know, and just try and rekindle. You know, that fire that I tried to light a few years ago. So I think that's what I've got to offer at the club. You know, I can help them in Asia with relationships, potentially sponsorship, potentially getting, you know, getting close to some of the players in maybe the K-League, Korea League or the J-League. In terms of issues going on in Europe or what happens day to day at Ibrox, I'm just an observer. So, you know, as long as financially we're stable, and we keep winning, I'm okay.
I think that's a good boilerplate statement. And so if I just take the last part of that in terms of the financial stability, we've looked at that. I imagine, you know, you recently put in more money, you know, which has been reported as well. You obviously believe in the long-term financial stability of the club. You think the right people are in the doors. That's why you're handing over the money. So in terms of the strategy that you were sold on, when you were initially asked, is that where it was supposed to be, or has that taken a dramatic hit because of pandemic,
no,
etc.?
I mean, from my first early conversations, it was always laid out to me that the ambition of the club is to first become sustainable. Because if you're not sustainable, all you're doing is relying on the goodwill of some well-endowed supporters. Now, as long as they're in a, you know, fair fettle, they're in a position to help. But if they're not in a position to help, what can you do? So I liked that. You know, that was the first thing. We need to become financially sustainable. So the club has to pay its way. And, you know, it's an extremely ugly expression. But really what Ross Wilson, I mean, there's two main financial pillars of the club. One is what I brutally call the livestock pillar, okay? That's the trading, the training and the nurturing of players, and then the trading on. It's almost a livestock business, right? I mean, I love all these players, don't get me wrong. But it's like livestock, right? You know, you bring them in, you feed them up, you fatten them up, and you send them out to a new pasture. And then you've got James, the commercial pillar. So in terms of where they're at now and where they're supposed to be when I first had the initial conversation, I think they've achieved it. You know, they're sustainable now. But we're second in the league. We're 9 points behind Celtic. That's just not acceptable. That's something we need to fix. You know, as our new manager said recently, and he got in a bit of trouble, that Celtic manager's been lucky. He had such vast sums at his disposal. Well, that's good for them, but they basically had no one to beat for the last 10 years, before we came back into the Premier League. So they should have accrued that wealth anyway. We'd have accrued the same wealth had we been in that position. So I think the club's reached sustainability financially. And there's a lot of good new initiatives happening. I mean, they just opened up Edmiston House. I missed the gala dinner, but I think it was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And there's been conversations going on with people that I deal with in my normal business that understand Rangers, understand the size of the club, and the fact that, there's a fair chance we will get a European exposure most years. So they like the idea of that. And they don't always just go for the glamour clubs in the English Premier League. So I think I can help there. But we are sustainable. I don't know, I'm kind of killing this answer just by belabouring it. We've reached that point. But again, we're behind Celtic. So we still have to have more money to be able to get into the transfer market, I think, in a bigger way. I think we probably need a handful of players, to be honest, during the summer. And they'll probably cost more than £1 or £2 million a time. So we do need to figure out a way to actually increase that pool of money that's available for the director of football.
Yeah, I think the sustainability part, actually, I don't think it can be laboured overly, given that if you want to have that model continuing, and we know what's happened historically, we've touched on that. It's got to be the first thing on the bold minutes, so to speak, in terms of every single meeting. I don't want to walk past, and you've given me some of the answer there, in terms of, you were talking about, and I think within some of the strategy that was laid out a couple of years back by the club, that pivot to Asia, not our phrase, I think it's a phrase that's used in different areas, but you're out there having discussions, you're bringing back some of the conversations you'd had previously pre-pandemic. I am interested in the footprint. You've touched on, some people would know the club, etc. But in terms of your view of what's the capability of growth of the Rangers brand within that Asian market, which is so lucrative, so fanatic, and so much virgin ground for Scottish football. Yeah.
I live in Tokyo, and nothing annoys me more to walk around Tokyo and see that young Japanese kids wearing Celtic strips. And my children are Japanese, well, my wife's Japanese, so the kids are Japanese as well. And they get confused and annoyed as well when they see other Japanese kids wearing Celtic strips, because fair play to the Celtic manager, he had that in-depth knowledge of the J-League. These players don't get paid a hell of a lot of money in the J-League, so he was smart. He got them over at very, very reasonable pricing. And it might be too late for us to tap into the J-League, because again, people who say you're just a kind of me too. You just follow the Celtic. They already carved that path and you're just following them. So maybe we should be exploiting some other parts of Asia. The K-League. I've got some good relationships with the South Korean champions. Talk to them frequently. So, I'm trying to build that relationship between the club and some of the South Korean clubs as well, because, our team aren't always in Asia, but for me to get to Seoul was an hour and 10 minutes on a flight. I can do it on a day trip, and I have done it in day trips recently. So I think that's maybe some of the value that I can bring. But for me, the brand is well known. You ask anybody, it doesn't matter if it's Timbuktu, to Sydney or Melbourne or Singapore, everybody knows the club. Everybody. And, it's just always a test when you get to a country like China, and it's just a common thing to talk to a taxi driver about. It puts you on that kind of common ground. You can have a conversation. Say Rangers, Gaza. That's usually what comes up. So I think we've not even began to exploit some sort of commercial excess in Asia, just with the brand. And that will come. I'm sure of that.
Yeah, I think it's lifeblood stuff in terms of, you want to be a forward-facing football club, you got to expand into those markets. And I think, as you were mentioning, the pound spend, so to speak, for a Scottish club like Rangers to get European exposure versus an English club or a European club is an attractive proposition. Yeah, financially anyway. I should take a stopping point to say, UEFA Cup final. Did you manage to make?
Yeah, I was there with my wife and twin boys. We were all there. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you, how did you find it? Result maybe to one side, but in terms of the run-up, was it just an increasing level of surprise, or was the club inside, from your view, really, really believing of this and this can happen?
During that season, we feared no one. We absolutely didn't show anybody any respect. We just went out there and did the job. And a lot of people say, the way we lost in penalties is the worst way to lose. I would rather lose in penalties than lose the game, because then you can say, well, it was a toss that coin at that point. We didn't lose in the football, we just lost in penalties. At that point, it's just tossing it heads or tails. So, it's not going to take away, the disappointment that we all felt. But if you're going to lose it, I'd rather lose it that way than just getting beat 3-0 or something like that.
Yeah, no, I get you. Going to places like going to Belgium, going to Dortmund, all that type of stuff as well. But you touch on an interesting point. No fear. That's a Gio team, and I'm not having a go at Giovanni van Bronckhorst here, but that team, by and large, some notable sales comes to the next season, and it's a totally different team to be watching.
Yeah, I didn't recognise it was the same players largely as you just mentioned, but I just didn't recognise the spirit of that team when we started this current season. You're looking at these players and think there's just no heart, there's no passion. Do they want to play? It might be a bit unfair and it might come across rather harshly, but I just felt, do these guys actually want to pull on the jersey sometimes? And the daft goals that we gave away and just the fitness levels, I was kind of shocked.
Yeah.
In Asia, when we watch the European games, they're usually 4 o'clock in the morning. So I would sit up, usually my wife's Japanese, she would join me. And she doesn't have a long history with football, but she'd get really into the whole Rangers thing, and she gets it. She gets it. The twins get it as well. Even she was saying it, I just don't see the same spirit here. It was so apparent. And I thought Gio was a great guy. I think his mum wanted to adopt 2 twins in Seville. We spent a lot of time together in Seville. His mother's lovely, by the way. His whole family's lovely. I thought she was going to adopt 2 twins. And my wife got upset when he get his daughters as well. I think she thought I had something to do with it, but I'm not even on the board. But she liked him a lot. He was a nice guy. And I'm still confident he'll find his success. He will find his success. But, it just stopped working. Don't know if it was manager, don't know if it was the players. I think they're all culpable, to be quite honest. Michael came in. I haven't met Michael. I'm hoping to meet him on Monday morning at Auchenhowie. I haven't met him yet, but I'm looking forward to meeting him. But it just, we've seen the results since he came in. We've had 1 draw and 8 wins or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a sea change.
Yeah,
as you're saying there, and you're right about Giovanni van Bronckhorst. I think have gone to good things. Sometimes it just stops working, and you need to make that managerial change. It is a bugbear of mine that by and large managers get swapped out. The team under them generally never get the flack, and I do think there was some players that do need to look hard at themselves. I'm sure the club's doing that as well. So I just did want to touch on the UEFA Cup, and we'll put that to bed now. But we've spoken then about, and I think when you first invested in the club, you had said, listen, I'll get to know what's going on. You see the board minutes, although you're an active observer, is probably, I think, fair to say. You've put more money in recently. Should we expect to see more of Stuart Gibson in terms of the club? Is there a board seat there for you?
Well, the thing about when you become a director, then I'm enjoying being a fan, right? Every time we lose a stupid goal in the first 50 minutes of a game, I want to fire the whole board. Trust me, I want to fire a lot of them. At the end of the game, we end up winning 3-1 or something like that. They're all fine. They're forgiven. Right? Keep their jobs.
That's big sevens tricks you're writing.
So I like being a fan. I just worry that if you become a director, some of the fun's going to go out of it. You got to ask yourself a question. Could you fire your boyhood heroes? I mean, don't forget, John Gregg, the greatest ever Rangers player, he was forced to resign in 1983. So we had to do that. I don't know if I'd be ready to have that dispassionate, disconnected level of separation between fan and director. Not right now, because I'm starting to enjoy the football again. But in my own business, you have to have that separation. You know, you might like certain people, but, you know, just performances aren't manifesting themselves in the numbers, so you've got to make that cold, hard decision. So, you know, if the board want me in the next couple of years, not right now, because I'm got a lot going on in Asia. If they want me in the next couple of years, yeah, I'd be available. But right now, I'm enjoying being a fan. As I say, you've got to ask yourself the question, would you sack your heroes? You know, I don't know if fans could always make the best directors, but I'm honest about it. No, I wouldn't like to sack some of the people I still idolise on the pitch.
Yeah.
You just don't want to be the guy that has to fire that guy. Doesn't mean I won't get to that point, but I'm just enjoying being a fan right now, to be quite honest.
No, listen, I think I can buy. I think I can buy completely into that. That it's an emotional thing first. Yes, you're in a great position to be able to help the club with funds that you've accrued through your career, hard-won funds. It's a different place when you're carrying the can, etc. It doesn't sound to me as though you're ruling it out any time in the future, but in the short term, we shouldn't expect that.
Yeah, I think the worst type of director would be a cheerleader.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be a cheerleader director, just think, Ranger, Magic, you know. I don't want to be that director. You know, if I'm going to be a director, I want to come into it and be constructive and have the hard conversations.
Could you be a director, or would that have to be chairman?
I don't even know if that's ever going to be offered to me.
That's no comment on the current.
Sure,
I'm not saying anything's changing anytime soon, but I'm trying to draw the threads of, you know, looked at your career, looked at the successes, the hard-won successes, spoken to you in person here, and heard your words. You don't strike me as you strike me as a team player, but control, leading, taking risks, making sure it's sustainable. These sounds like strategy things that are laid out by a chairman.
Yeah, but the way I feel right now is you've got John Bennett, you know, you get the Park family, the whole board of directors, you get Julian Waltart. I have utmost trust and confidence in these guys that I just don't feel I've got anything to offer right now. Apart from putting in funds, you know, I don't think I've got anything to offer. I can help. And I liked your expression, an active observer. I can help being an active observer by just helping them in Asia. At the board level, I just wouldn't be able to put the time to it right now. So, you know, it would be an honour and a privilege if that was ever extended to me, you know, in the future. You know, I'm probably ready for it in the future, but I say I'm enjoying being a fan right now.
Well, hopefully that continues with results.
Yeah, every time I watch a game, I'm sending a WhatsApp message to George Taylor saying to sack the effing bold. Usually it's 15 minutes into the game.
Well, it's nice to know you're not a fast reaction there, to be honest with you. Yeah, we can translate that into some of the potential negativity you sometimes get in Ibrox, for example, as well, with that 15-minute turnaround. I like that 15-minute window of people's minds are set.
You just know it's going to come. Like, Jesus, we know it's going. We've seen the movie every 2 weeks at Ibrox. I mean, what can we do to stop this? Yeah, we know there's going to be a high press from the beginning. You know, they're going to be well up the field, but somehow we need to get over that. Yeah,
listen, I'm with you there as well. So, I mean, we're coming towards a close here, and I very much appreciate your time. But I did want to go back maybe towards the start of the conversation a little bit as well, in terms of, you've come in, I'm not asking you to solve Scottish football's problems, but as you've referenced the J-League, the K-League, they've got a lot of progressive, innovative things going on as well, particularly when it comes to media deals, getting their message out there. We see down in Wrexham with you know, what they're doing as well in terms of Ryan Reynolds, etc. Scottish football TV deals. What's your feeling on some of the strange decisions we make?
I mean, this is an old chestnut. It's been kicked around for the last probably 30, 40 years, but I personally feel the future of Scottish football is not Scottish football, it should be British football. And you always hear the old chestnut, which are the Rangers and Celtic and the Premier League and the Championship. I don't think that would work. You've got to have all 28 clubs from Scotland in a united UK league. You can't take two because that just kills the rest. It's never going to work. But you take 28, and you combine them. I think that should be a 10-year plan. Again, people say, yeah, right, everybody says that, but it never happens. I've had conversations at Downing Street about that, and there's a political will to do it.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a surprise to me. So at that level, there's a geopolitical push, if you like, to actually draw those threads together.
Yeah.
Can I ask what your role was in that conversation?
I was asked to go to Downing Street and meet Boris 2 weeks before he gets sacked, so I'm sure he doesn't remember that conversation.
Were you texting after 15 minutes saying that he was out?
Yeah. And they asked me, I just said, look, common thread that runs through Scotland is everybody's nuts about football. I said, you do get people that get their views on separation and being in a union. I said, but to be quite honest, if you had the chance of a British United Cup where Forfar might get drawn against Arsenal, you would think your Forfar fans would love that opportunity.
Yeah.
And if you say to them, well, if you ever vote for him, this is not a political statement, this is just kind of me laying out, just the practicalities of why it could and couldn't work. But then if you say, well, if you go for independence, you won't have the opportunity because you won't be in the British United Cup. I think these fans would say, yeah, but we still want a chance to play against Arsenal or Liverpool.
Yeah.
So my idea was that you could basically find purpose of unity through football. And as I said, the old idea about Rangers and Celtic is never going to work. You need to think about the 28 clubs. Then SFA and SPFL, they'll all hate it because they've got their own self-interest. And, the English FL hate it. But the British government liked it. They actually liked it a lot. As I say, Boris get fired 2 weeks later, so... And I don't even want to go and talk to the current Prime Minister. I don't know how long he's going to be. I might just wait to the next one after that.
Yeah, I think they're all getting signed on interim short-term loans at the moment. And I fully appreciate you're not making any sort of political statement there. It's not the purpose of it. But it's interesting from a non-football perspective as well, that conversation was part of that, and the fact that football could translate into that type of world.
I had a dinner with Michael Gove. It was just a couple of months before that in London. And, explained the idea to him, and he thought it was a great idea, and he said, you need to go in and meet Boris. So I did. I went down the street and met the PM and some of his aides, and as I say, I was surprised. I told him, I'd say the SFA and SPFL threw up at the idea, and probably the English Association will as well. And he said, well, that's our role as government, to bring these threads together, and provide that conduit for the conversation to happen. I said, well, that's my idea. Go and make it work.
And then they realised them.
Well, my idea was start with a cup. You don't just say, take 28 teams and just plop them in with, the Welsh teams and the English team. Do a cup every 2 years. Not every year, because, just the schedules are they're too busy. Do it every 2 years. Do a United Cup, Union Cup. Think of some non-political expression to call it. Do it every 2 years. And then after 10 years, have the goal of actually having a United League for the UK. You'd have to do it every 2 years as like a pilot study.
Yeah, I get that.
And you would see that the English clubs would love it. Just get the chance to kind of travel up and down the country and play against Aberdeen when you get a real Aberdeen team, and Rangers and Celtic and Hibs in the heart.
Yeah, well, I think people are always looking to innovate. Yeah. And that's the interesting part of that. What I think, listeners, subscribers, watchers, Rangers fans might find really interesting there as well, next to the idea, is the fact that there's somebody connected with the club. And I think you've been very, underplayed the weight that you have in Asia and the size of your organisation that you've driven forward. The club has somebody connected with them who has such a connected network that within a few steps they're in speaking to the UK Prime Minister. I mean, that doesn't sound to me, as you're saying it, that that's something of a surprise to you, or indeed something that's not a daily occurrence, but it's not an exceptional thing.
No, I mean, I'm just fortunate I have that access.
Yeah.
I have access at fairly high levels, most of Asia and certainly UK. But don't get me wrong, that idea wasn't sanctioned by Rangers. That was just me getting off my own.
And well, that's more of an interesting thing as well. So I think we're coming to the last question or two here in terms of we've covered where you've come from and where you think the club is going. I suppose if there was two final things I'd ask you, which is if you were in the chairman's seat and you could go off on your own, because you've just said it there, to do something for the club, what would that be? And maybe the second part of that would be, for the Rangers fans listening and watching, what would your message be?
Yeah, well, as I said, I did answer that first question.
Well, if there's something else, though.
No, United League, I think that would be the 10-year plan.
Okay.
And people, there'd be naysayers that would say, it'll never happen, but it could happen. And as I say, I was encouraged by the response I got at Downing Street and at many levels of government. I think the SNP would probably have something to say about it, but I don't care about them anyway. With regards to Rangers fans, we're all in it together. It doesn't matter if you're one of the big guys that owns 5% or 10%, or where you just bought some shares through crowdfunding. You didn't do it to make money. You're not going to do it for day trading and sell your shares and make a few quid. So where are you crowdfunded to buy some shares, or where you're in a fortunate position to buy a big chunk? We're all in it for the same reasons. And, I think when you see sometimes the factionalizations of the supporters clubs and the fan bases, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. So, but as you said earlier, you get three Rangers supporters sitting around a table and a fight might break out anyway.
We've done well here. We've done really well.
Yeah, it's not all going to be peace and love. But we've all got that common base between us and that foundation. We should never forget that, but it'd be good if we could all just keep away from the press. The press aren't our friends in Scotland, so you just keep the dialogue away from the media.
I think that's a good stopping point. So I just wanted to say thank you to our friends at Podcast Studio Glasgow for hosting us here. And more importantly, Stuart, thanks for your time.
Thanks very much. Cheers.